Hey everyone, welcome to a midweek conversation where we talk about this past Sunday's message, follow up on that, maybe talk about ideas that we unpack even more, any related ideas that couldn't quite make it to the sermon. We've laughed about we could easily talk about everything and strap in for an 8-hour sermon, right? So there's always stuff that's left on the cutting room floor. We talk about maybe this week's readings, things that stood out to us, things like that. But I'm joined by Joe, one of our elders who preached on Sunday. And did you catch what happened on Sunday with who was all leading and involved? That was really kind of a beautiful moment for the church. There was not a single paid person involved.
That's right.
In Sunday.
That's right.
The pre-service prayer was started and concluded and run by two lay people, two members of the congregation. The worship team was led by a lay person who stepped up in the absence of a leader, like a worship leader.
That's right. That's right.
The paid pastors were at a conference, right? Like we were out of state for the whole week, so we had a lay member preach. Like that was that. I don't know if everybody caught that, but that was significant.
I didn't catch that. That's awesome.
It's cool.
when you bring that up, that is, wow, what a cool thing for our church.
Especially talking about sanctification and like letting God shine through us, right? Like Sunday was a great example of what you preached on. This idea of as we behold the glory of the Lord, we shine.
Yeah.
And that shining is not reserved for the people who get paid to do this. Like the congregation shone on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was really, really cool.
That is awesome. That is really cool.
Yeah.
I did not catch that.
Yeah. So that was pretty special. I'm gonna make a point of it in the email as well. Because I don't think that's a small thing. I think it shows that the church is not individual centric. It's not built on any one person. Hopefully that's like when we draw attention to it, people realize, oh, we can do this. We can be the church like we're called to be.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yep.
That's huge.
Sorry, that was kind of
No, that's awesome.
That was just one of the things I was really excited about Sunday.
Yeah.
All right, so you gave a great message, unpacked some beautiful truths. You went back to the Old Testament, tied the Old Testament to the New Testament, tied the whole biblical narrative together, which is always wonderful. Anything that you want to unpack more of? Anything that you're like, man, if I had an extra 30 minutes, we could have also touched on this?
Yeah. I mean, nothing really pops out at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think the key emphasis of, especially at the end, like at the conclusion where everything just points back to Christ. And I think that us taking the time to realize that that's not only in the New Testament, but in the Old as well, that we can see this pointing and aiming towards Christ. And I think if I had the time to go over more passages like that, of where we see the Old Testament steering towards Christ, I think that's
cool.
Because you can see that, and that's the theme of what Paul's talking about here. Is like, that was with the old, but it was pointing
towards
to
Jesus.
the new.
Yep. Yeah, that foreshadowing, right?
Yes.
Where like hindsight is 2020.
Yeah. And if you had enough time to just show the whole story, but that's why we preach expositorily.
It was a really great emphasis on the supremacy of Christ and the sovereignty of Christ from the beginning. And then I always love when this happens. I went up to Tim afterwards and I was like, man, like, you guys were on the money with how he ended the sermon and then the song you picked. And Tim was like, we didn't talk about it at all.
I didn't say anything. We didn't text throughout the week or anything. But when they sang that last song, I was like, holy smoke, that's great.
It was such a beautiful response to the message. And especially I love, what were the three things you said? I know all three were great, but I really, really just got fixated on the first one because I thought it was so relevant for the church today, like in this century, in this year, right? Where you said, like, you were talking about the supremacy of Jesus and you said he clarifies what is murky. Like he brings clarity to what is murky. And that was fantastic.
Yeah. That was the moment we're just thinking about the passage as a whole. And You see that like with the veil, because like when you
Yep.
put the veil and the veil's there, it obstructs,
Yep.
the person that's wearing it, and also who's looking. Like if you think about like if when your wife when she wore a wedding veil, like you couldn't see her face.
You can't see her face as well. She can't see out as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
That's what I mean. It was such
yeah.
it was such a wonderful phrasing encapsulating that idea of the veil is removed.
Yeah.
What wasn't in crystal clear imagery, Christ brings it into clarity.
And I think you're right to your point. In this day and age in which we live, in the world in which we live, there are a lot of things that are murky.
There are a lot of things that are murky, and there are a lot of things we want to pretend are murky.
Yeah.
Or there are a lot of things we make murky.
Yeah.
By bringing in outside. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this might be clear, but if I pour some sand in it, well, now it'll get diluted and cloudy. So, well, you shouldn't have put sand in it to begin with.
Right.
But Jesus is what brings that clarity back.
Yeah.
So I really, really like that. Then the passages you chose for us to read, I was saying a little bit ago, like Isaiah 43 is just one of those fantastic, fantastic passages. And I really love at the very start in verse 1, when right out of the gate he says, he who created you says, fear not, for I have redeemed you. And earlier, a moment ago, you said, Jesus, this passage in 2 Corinthians points to how everything in the Bible was building up to Jesus and was pointing to Jesus even before Jesus arrived. Like, God said, I have redeemed you, past tense, before Jesus was ever born.
Right.
Like,
Right.
just his relationship with time, like, no, I have redeemed you.
Yeah.
I have eternally redeemed you.
The plan was always there.
Always there.
And Jesus was always the plan to begin with, since the beginning.
Yep.
And that is just, when that clicks, it's such a beautiful thing in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
That our Father loves us so much that he already knew what to do and how to save us. And that plan was already put in place. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Another thing I love in Isaiah 43, thinking about the message, you spent time talking about how like the people of Israel were afraid of Moses, right? Because of his shining. So there's a sense that, even as God is like physically transforming him in that moment, it brought fear to the people. And I love that in Isaiah, he's like, no, don't be afraid of what I'm doing.
Right.
That's really, now I want to be careful not to get too eisegetical and read into the text what's not in the text. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that like the glory on Moses's face was like some foreshadowing or something, like beyond what the text said, right? Like you made the text very clear. But if I summarized Isaiah 43 to someone who wasn't familiar with it, I'd basically be like, God saying like, don't be afraid of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I think that even in and of itself is a really cool juxtaposition with, God was using Moses and speaking through him, and the people were afraid of it. And okay, the lesson there for us today is like, are we afraid of what God might be doing?
Yeah.
Because it's different, or it's intimidating, or it's
Uncomfortable.
or like you said, just flat out beyond our thought process, right? Like, if any of us walked into the sanctuary on a Sunday morning and our face was like glowing, people would be freaked out because it's outside of our rational thought process.
Yeah, makes no sense.
And so I think it's really cool that, when he's talking about saving his people, when he's talking about redeeming his people, when he's talking about doing a new thing, he opens it all up by saying like, don't be afraid, I'm doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
What else? Why were you thinking Isaiah 43?
I think for that reason, and it what sticks out to me about this passage is that it says that I'm doing a new thing. That we're not held by this old standard of I have to keep this rule and that rule in order to be made righteous.
Yeah.
It's not me doing it.
Yeah.
And that new thing is that it's all through Christ. It's him that transforms us and makes us new. And it's nothing that I can do. I can't make myself righteous.
Yeah.
And that's the only path is Christ. And I think that's what stuck out to me. And I wanted that emphasis to be there, that that's the path, is this new way that God created, and not, because we still, I think that way at times. Like, if I could just do this good enough, if I could just not, swear just that one time,
If
or
I could follow these rules better.
follow these rules better, then, because I think we still fall into that sometimes, and not that full reliance on Christ.
Yeah. Because rules are, in a sense, rules are easy, right? Rules are a checklist. Rules are a concrete thing that I can look at and say, I did this today, therefore I am a good person, right? Like, I did not steal today.
Yeah.
Therefore, I am a good person.
Right.
I did not kill today. Therefore, I am a good person.
Right.
It's a lot harder when Jesus says, like, well, if you've looked at a brother with anger in your heart, you've committed murder. So even though rules are really crippling and really drive us away from grace and everything, they're also, in a weird sense, oddly comforting because they are so stark and simple on the paper that I can point to it and, oh, because I did this, I am a good person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went and I looked up like what were the 613?
13.
Yeah. And just reading some of those, and some of those are easy, like wash your hands, before you eat type of stuff, and stuff that are easy to follow. And but yeah, that's the emphasis that I wanted to make with that passage.
It's good. And I don't want to get into it. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but definitely, if you haven't read Isaiah 43 already, make sure you read it this week, because not only does it really beautifully summarize the message that you gave on Sunday, there's also one or two verses that provide a really nice setup for where we're going this coming Sunday.
Nice.
So that was a really cool passage that you picked, where one or two verses in Isaiah 43 really do establish where then the text in 2 Corinthians is leading, that we'll be looking at this coming Sunday. So it actually wound up being a really cool bridge the two Sundays chapter, which is fun. Because once again, you and I did not coordinate that at all.
We did not.
It was, I love studying the Bible, because you see how it all reinforces together.
It all connects.
Yep.
And it's all one cohesive, beautiful story.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so Isaiah 43, then we've got New Testament. I even just, love the jumping from Isaiah to Romans. Romans 10, walk us through what stands out to you in Romans 10. If somebody's reading this and they're like, okay, I'm trying to get better at studying the Bible, what should they be looking for in Romans 10?
How righteousness comes through by faith, I think, is the big one.
Yeah.
Was the emphasis that I wanted to make, that it's not through, because it says there in verse 5, Moses writes about the righteousness based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteous based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that it is to Christ to bring down, and who descends into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. He goes on and just talks about it's through the faith, through faith in Christ, Christ rising again. And that's where righteousness comes from. It's through Christ's sacrifice, and not what the law says. Following that. So that was the thought process behind that.
Yeah, Romans 10 is, it's hard to get through Romans 10 and not see those verses.
Yeah.
And so another good chapter. So why do we, how am I trying to phrase this? Why do we resist our face shining? For lack of a more clarified wording in my head, right? Moses went, sought the presence of God, spent time with the presence of God, and it transformed him.
Yeah.
We're called to that same transformation today, to pursue sanctification, to work out our faith, to make every effort.
Yeah.
Why do we resist our face shining today?
Ooh.
I'm sitting in your office, Pastor Joe. This is hard for me, right? Like, this doesn't come easily to me. This doesn't, I don't know if I want my face to shine. What questions are you asking me?
I'm asking you why. First of all, why does it scare you? Are you uncomfortable?
Okay, that's a good follow-up question. Are you uncomfortable?
Does it make you uncomfortable? And why does it make you uncomfortable?
What do you mean, Pastor Joe?
Do you think that you have to do this on your own?
Ooh,
Like,
okay. I see.
yeah.
Okay.
Because the
Yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I
Yeah.
think, because I kind of was raised in like a legalistic house, right?
Yeah.
So what do you mean I don't have to do this on my own?
Your transformation and you in your face shining, I would say, is not done by your under your own power. It's through Christ in you, living
Okay.
in you. And that's your heart is transformed. And then you can take that step. But you also have to take the step and be willing to take that step, I think.
Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying. And I think maybe it is. I grew up in a very legalistic church, legalistic house. My parents weren't Christian. So, okay, I kind of get what you're saying. But, like, honestly, I work in the stock room at the grocery store. Like, why do I need to be transformed for the stock room?
Because wherever you are, God has placed you there for a reason. He's sovereign over all things. And there's still people in that stock room that need to hear Jesus.
Okay.
People you come in contact with, that, and we're not called to just go and seek out and leave where we're supposed to be, but also where God puts us is also somewhere where we can share the gospel. It doesn't have to be in Africa or standing on the street corner.
So, what you're saying is, if I remember your sermon from Sunday, like, maybe God has placed me in that stock room so that as I'm living my life with the veil removed, I could help show people what life looks like without that veil.
Exactly.
Huh.
That's
Okay.
where to reflect Christ in our inward character out. Because the world is a lost place.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. Thanks, Pastor Joe.
You're welcome.
I'm glad you picked up on me, like, just lapsing into, like, my parents weren't saved. Just
Yeah.
But those are the conversations we have, right? That's
Yeah.
what our neighbors want to know. That's what
Yeah.
our family members want to know. What our friends want to know, right? Like,
Yeah.
why does this matter for me? How
Yeah.
does this matter for me? What is this?
Yeah.
But here's my background. Why is this still applicable to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, good answers. I like them. Yeah, it was just good. It's something that I think needs to be at the front of our mind.
Constantly.
Yeah. And it's really hard for me not to launch into Sunday's message because this part in Corinthians just really builds so powerfully on itself.
Yep.
And we're going to get going.
Yeah, it moves pretty good.
It gets good.
Yeah.
I would use whatever today's phrase is to describe it as good, but I don't know what the language is today. I'm 80 years old on the inside, man.
I understand.
This is as good as a butterscotch.
I love it.
No, any other thoughts as we're wrapping up?
No, I think we got it.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to read those passages this week, and then also go back and read the verses in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, 12 through 18, and just refresh on those too.
Yeah, man.
Because it's good. It's good
Cool
stuff.
Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, if you've got your job situation, your family situation that as we were running through, you were thinking of your own life and you want to hear our thoughts on how it applies, reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation. Otherwise, we will see you Sunday.